All right, guys, calm down. I know you're excited. It's contract time, but you can, just simmer down, everyone. So thank you so much for coming today. We've got nearly a full classroom. We're expecting all these rows to fill out before class starts. We're also streaming online. So for those of you who are streaming online, there's a link that you can click to access all the documents Cathy's going to be talking about. It's in a Google Drive. Plus for you guys, if you want to pull these docs, if you don't want to go to .loop, they're in a Google Drive that I've sent an email to everybody so you can attach those. So with no further ado, Cathy, take it away.
Thank you, James. Thank you. Well, first of all, thank all of you for coming. I didn't realize he was being facetious when he said you're excited about contracts, because I get excited about it. But I guess I'm the only person who does. That's why you called me. But we apologize for the late delivery of this class. However, we had it scheduled early. Most of you know that we got the weather. We weren't able to get the class. So, unfortunately, I took the class as CE, was taught by an attorney, Georgia Association of Realtors. And she said the same thing that I've been saying, is starting last year, they come out with the forms on January 1, but training's not scheduled after that, and they tell us you cannot use 2017 forms anymore. So it's kind of hard to do when you haven't been trained on the forms. So I'm going to make a suggestion. She says to make a suggestion that the next year, 2019, that we get ahead of it. So I wanted to make this CE, wasn't able to because there wasn't enough time to get it certified. I have to have it approved by Greg to teach it as CE, and it takes a little while, and we're going to wait for it. So like I said, do not use the 2017 forms anymore. If you are accessing the forms on .loop, last time I checked, the GAR forms with our logo is still 2017. It just takes a while for them to print the forms. I do not know why, but I guess, you think of every office that they got to put them on in the state that wants their logo on there. So it takes a while to get them on there. So you're going to have to go to GAR Interactive Forms on .loop to get the 2018 form. Any questions about that? Okay. I know you're excited. This is what we're going to be going by. I hope everybody's got a copy of this. It's called 2018 GAR Forms Changes. Anybody that's watching online, you can print this out. This is also available on the GAR Interactive Forms on .loop. There's also a list, an index of all the GAR forms by topic, and I suggest that you print that out. I didn't give that to you as a handout. I did give it as a handout in team meeting. But it's a great form because a lot of times you go, what form do I use? Well, this is great to go by, but it's called the GAR Forms Index, and it is on .loop, same place GAR Interactive Forms. And what we're going to do is, I didn't give you a copy of every form and every change because it's just not possible. So some of them have minor changes, or some of them have changes that are same as what was on another form, like exclusive, listed agreement, non-exclusive. The changes are identical. It's just what was there before wasn't changed. Couple of things that they did this year. They eliminated their disclaimer at the bottom of every page of the form, which says this form is copyrighted and may only be used in real estate transactions in which your name is involved. They used to have that on every page. That's not on there anymore. The other thing that they have changed is they have eliminated on every form retainer fee. Anytime it references a retainer fee, that's not on the form anymore because they got a new form for it. And we don't, in the Rawls group, allow retainer fees, so you don't need it anyway. Other thing that they have added is they've had it in there before, but more detailed wording about cyber fraud. And when I went to the training that was taught by an attorney, she said, I don't care if it's in the contract. My personal opinion as a lawyer is that your office, if you have your own wire fraud form, do we have one?
Yes.
She said you need to use it. Because if you were involved anyway in cyber fraud, even though you're not at fault, usually when lawyers sue, what do? They sue everybody that's involved. So it's best that we get that, still use that form. So we will still be using that form, okay? So I'm going to start at the very beginning on here. Follow along. It is a bit confusing, so I'll try to make it as clear for you as possible.
That was the one you gave out the other day, right?
Yes, it should be up here.
Yes. From form?
I apologize for sitting down, but I think most of you know I have back problems, so I'll probably sit and stand a little bit, but I don't think you mind. When you look at this form, on this side is what the original form had. And that's referencing paragraphs. When it has the little paragraph sign, everybody know what the little paragraph sign up here is under F1, paragraph A2. That is what the paragraph is. If it has little asterisks, there were no paragraphs for those things, so they've been added. So if it has an asterisk over here, that means that it wasn't there before. And what they have added on B2, and the B, yes, you probably know by now, are brochures. So it's referenced by a B. It is a brochure. Protect yourself when buying a home. There's, be careful to avoid scams. Replace section with more updated. Beware of cyber fraud language, is what I said. There's more detailed information on cyber fraud. Everybody know what cyber fraud is? Our form is protect yourself. Everything has to do with wires, but that's when we've had it happen in this office twice. Once was caught, once was not caught, and our seller lost $200,000. So it's very important you get this filled out. It's very important that you emphasize with your client to read it and know what they're doing. And be careful that they do not get an email or any information to transfer wire money unless they call, not the name on the email, because that's what happened when the seller lost $200,000. But they call you, the agent, or they call the attorney, know the attorney's number, or they call the lender's number. Now, our office accepts wire transfers on earnest money only in certain circumstances, and that's usually somebody that's out of town that can't get it here will accept it. And Erin has procedures she sends out that follows the procedures. Beware of wire fraud. But normally we do not accept wire for earnest money. We will, but not as a rule. Any questions on that? Two new things they've added to this B2 brochure is a new section regarding potential surveillance in a seller's home. Has anybody ever thought about that before?
100%.
Yeah, I got some calls. I think you called me one time, Drew, about that. I don't know. But it's warning the buyer that, hey, you're walking through the seller's house. They may be videoing you right now. Or some of them I've heard they go down the street and watch live as your buyer goes through the house. Be careful what you say, be careful what you do, because you're being videoed and you're in a seller's house and they can legally do that. So it's warning them about that. You might want to warn them about that too. Then added new section regarding lead pipes in homes, and just talks about to have the water tested, because there may be lead in the pipes, and it's warning them to have it tested for lead. So then you might want to think about just a test for your buyers. Second one is protect yourself when buying a home. You can see in B3, you're going to see minor changes in here is like they added a comma between buyer procedures. The ABCs of agency, B9, broker-client relationship, they changed, it was a typo. Okay, they changed denied to defined. So those are just minor changes, but they got to list every single change they made on the contract. Okay, we're going to go over the exclusive seller listing agreement, and that's F1, and it's going to be in the order of the numbering of the contracts. The the old number in the contract. This one, the number changed. So F1 is the listing agreement, and they added parentheticals for starting and ending date, and they eliminated the wording, and this is paragraph A2 on the first page. They eliminated the listing period unless otherwise terminated in accordance with the agreement. Why would we eliminate that? Because we don't want them to terminate. And we don't let them think they can terminate, although they can, but that's why I think the reason they eliminated. That's my guess. Brochures, they added GAR before each brochure. So it'll be GAR form B2. So they added that. Okay, and then they added new retainer fee exhibit. I'm looking at paragraph A5 brochures, and there's a retainer fee exhibit. It used to say retainer fee in a section of A5. Now it doesn't, but there is an exhibit that you're not going to be using anyway. We're going to go down to paragraph B2A. That's on the left side, initial listing period. Again, they eliminated unless otherwise terminated in accordance with this agreement. So we don't want to deal with that. B5, they see, if you look over here where it says paragraph B5 brochures, it's just telling you it's moved to paragraph C8. So that's the only change. Is everybody following along with me, or am I losing them?
What page are you on?
Okay. If you look at the first page of the contract, those are the blanks, right? That's A. Everything that's paragraph A is going to be the blanks in the first part of the contract. Then when you look at, and it goes down to in the listing agreement, down to special circumstances where it still has blanks to fill in, okay? That's all A, the section A. Then you look at B. B is corresponding paragraphs for section A. So it's just like we did before. Any blank that you fill in section A, the first page, and this one, some part of the second page, this gives detailed information for each one of those blanks. Okay? So if we're looking at B5, which was moved to C8, C starts on page 5. Okay? Now those are other terms and conditions that are not related to the blanks on section A where there's blanks in the first part. You following along with me? Are you okay now? Mm-hmm. Clear to you? Okay. There is an error on here. It says paragraph B6A, and it's actually marketing, generally modified language regarding right to use media to market property. Okay? Mm-hmm. That is actually B5A on page 3.
Wait, so they put it, say that again, please?
They're saying it's B6A, but they're not saying it's a different paragraph. It is now B5A, marketing generality. Generally. You along with me?
Yeah.
The paragraph that's listed to the left is a mistake. Okay? It's not 6A, it's 5A. 6A is commission, 5A is marketing. Okay? And they say they modified the language and added language regarding right to use media to market the property. And you're going to see this on a lot of the forms now, stating that we have the right to use media to market the property. Is everybody with me?
Yep.
We're on page 3. Now we're going to look at B5C, not B6C, under marketing, because that's wrong on this form. And it says consent of seller to be called. It's modified to reflect that seller consents only to calls from broker. Used to say, I think it said, seller consents to be called concerning the property. And we would use that and we call it expired listings. Now you can't. You say, well, you signed it on the listing agreement to be called, and now they've changed it because of complaints by people being called on expired listings and do not call list. That now they are only giving consent to be called by the listing broker. Is that clear? I'm not a lawyer. I'm not going to tell you what to do. That's just what it says. You who call expired listings, that's your deal. You know, you're not supposed to call them and do not call list. That changes things a little bit for people that call expired listings especially. Okay, section A5 used to be retainer fee. That was A8, that's on the first page. Section remove. Section C4, that's very minor changes. C6A, C6F, which is probably the very last, that's on page 6. Again, that's beware of cyber fraud. More detailed language warning them about cyber fraud. And again, you're going to see this on all the forms. Purchase and sale agreement, listing agreement, BBA. Okay. Any questions on the exclusive listing agreement? Everybody with me? And I suggest you make notes where I said there were changes. I've highlighted them here. I suggest that you circle it, put an asterisk to it. That's why I gave you the printed copy of the form, so that you could put an asterisk or circle where there are some changes. Okay, next the F2, the non-exclusive seller listing agreement. All the changes are the same as what they did to the exclusive listing agreement. And we very seldom use the non-exclusive listing agreement. It's very rare cases that we use the non-exclusive listing agreement. And if you have any questions on that, do you have any questions on that, a non-exclusive listing agreement? Okay. Let's say you have somebody you know and they want you to represent them. They already have somebody who's going to buy their house and it's not listed. You could do the non-exclusive listing agreement for that particular transaction only. You can't put it on FMLS. And we do not allow you to market the property with that. Is that clear? Authorization to show listed property F3. We're now to page 2 of the changes. Any questions?
So if you know the person says, I want this a quiet listing, I don't want other people to know about it. If you know going in you're not going to put it in the FMLS, would you do the non-exclusive? Or you can still have the exclusive and not put it in.
They can sell it to somebody else with another broker if it's not exclusive.
Okay, so you're saying if you know that you're not going to be putting on FMLS and all those things, you can still use an exclusive seller's listing agreement.
No, you cannot.
It's gotta be
Authorization
We are
to show unlisted
required
property.
to put it in FMLS and MLS if it's got a listing agreement within 48 hours of the seller's signature.
You would use authorization to show unlisted property.
Well, authorization to show unlisted property does not create any agency.
Right, I know. But
Right. So it depends on whether her seller wants her to represent them. But authorization to show unlisted property means that you just bring them buyers. It doesn't create agency. You could bring an agent and say and show them the property, but then you sign a non-exclusive if they want you to represent them. And I'd sign a non-exclusive before I brought Michael, the buyer, to show the property. But call me on that, okay? It does get confusing. It does get confusing. Because authorization to show unlisted property does not create representation. All it does is create an agreement to pay you. And you list the names of the people that you've shown it to. If you do an open house or a seller, FSBO, you need an authorization to show a listed property. You need to list everybody that came to that open house. That's another question, another class, okay? And then they did add paragraph 15, receipt by owner of consumer protection brochure. Now paragraph 16 and language formatted. And you should give the receipt of owner of consumer protection brochure. You really ought to give it to them. They sign an authorization showing listed property. Just being upfront what they should protect themselves with, even though they're not listed. Okay, now we're going to go over the exclusive buyer broker agreement. And again, they moved all blanks to the first page. Does everybody like that? I do. I'm sure the people that review contracts really like it. It makes it easier.
Yeah.
But I like it. That all the blanks are on the first page, and paragraph B is corresponding paragraphs for section A. So any blank here in section A, your buyer has questions about it, it's detailed and corresponding paragraphs for section A, which is in section B. Okay. Here's one, paragraph 1, which is now A1 and B1. In B1, they added, if you look at the bottom of the page, here, B1, last paragraph, first sentence. Buyer represents the buyer has the full authority to enter into this agreement. Why is that important? Yeah, they, you know, somebody may say, yeah, they may not, their name not even be on the title. I have the calls all the time. It's an estate. It's an estate. They have to have, you know, they have to have gone through probate court, and they must be executor of the estate or co-executor of the estate.
This is buyer, not seller.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, buyer. I'm sorry. They did add it on the exclusive listing agreement. That was all. I'm sorry. It was already on the exclusive listing agreement. I apologize. Already on the exclusive listing agreement. And I'll tell you why that's important. Because we had an agent call out to list property, and it was stolen identity. Vacant property for 2 years. And it was listed, and that person was not the owner. It was a scam. And then it was discovered when the will was probated and the daughter wanted to list it. The agent was doing a search for comps and saw that we had listed it. So they added on the buyer broker agreement too. And I'm not sure these situations where they don't have authority to enter an agreement unless they're not mentally competent. The agreement constitutes the sole and entire agreement. Okay, we're going to go on to they did eliminate on the term of the agreement, paragraph 2A, the term of the agreement they eliminated unless otherwise terminated in accordance with this agreement. Okay, the broker duties to buyer. That is now C1D, which is on page 3. Other terms and conditions, broker's duties to buyers. They removed check boxes. Do you remember there was a check box saying what they wanted you to do? They removed check boxes and it just says in 1D, assist to the extent requested by buyer negotiating terms of filling out a pre-printed real estate form and sale agreement. Before they said, you know, whether they wanted you to negotiate for them or not. Okay? This is saying, you know, if request to the extent requested by buyer. Why they changed it, I don't know, because it's to the extent requested by buyer. So if they don't want you to negotiate for them, I don't know why they want you, but right? You know, they want you to go open doors. Attorneys will do that. Attorneys will do that. Next we have retainer fee removed. That's paragraph 6 used to be on there. That's removed. Protected period in commissions. That's paragraph 8. And that is now A7 and B7 retitled protected period. Okay, A7 is the first page. It just says protected period blanks with 7.
Yeah.
Okay, it's now retitled to protected period instead of protected period in commissions. They just took off commissions, that's all. Disclosures on C5. A and B. They removed customers from subsection B and C. Used to have customers in there, it doesn't say the word customers in there anymore. The extension, paragraph 17, they just changed it to paragraph B2B. Referrals, if you look at C8, which is on page 4. Everybody with me?
Yeah.
It now says referral should buyers seek to purchase real property in an area which broker is unfamiliar, or for the sale of buyer's property, buyer hereby authorized broker to refer buyer to another broker or licensed broker. So before it was buying, now it's talking about if they have property to sell too. They authorize you to make a referral. Anybody see my broker's corner about referrals?
Yeah.
Say yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go back and look it up.
Yeah.
You are required to have acknowledgement from a person to refer them to somebody else. They have to have you have to have acknowledgement. And there is a form, it's either CO10 or CO11, it's in my email, okay? But this is already an acknowledgement, okay, if you decide to refer them out.
But you still need that form.
You know, if they already sign a buyer brokerage agreement, they are telling you they're okay if you refer them.
Okay.
So that's already an acknowledgement. So I don't know, you really wouldn't need it. But if somebody comes to you and they say, hey, a friend of mine, you know, wants to buy, you know, somewhere in South Georgia and you're going to refer them out, then they would need to sign acknowledgement. Most people don't know that. It's taught in license law. And then on the receiving end, prior to closing, you're required to let your buyer or seller know you're paying a referral fee to somebody else. We've got people get to closing, they find out you're paying a referral fee to somebody else, and then they say, I don't want them to get the money. That happened after I wrote this. I had a call this weekend on it, yeah. And the person didn't know that she was paying a referral fee to somebody in Savannah on every transaction they did.
Who, the agent didn't know?
The agent knew, the buyer didn't know. She was paying a referral fee on every transaction. It was an investor. Every buy and sell that investor did. He did not know, and then he asked her to reduce her commission. It's kind of hard to reduce your commission and pay a 25% referral fee. So, let them know up front, okay? Disclose.
This in case we don't have a buyer agreement with them. If I know someone, she wants to sell her house and want to refer her.
You get her to sign an acknowledgement for it. It's in the Broker's Corner email that I sent out. It's a short form that acknowledges that you will get, the broker will get valuable consideration for you referring her. Okay? You don't need a buyer-broker agreement with them. You just need to let them know if you're getting paid to refer them to somebody else, they need to know you're getting paid.
Yeah.
I mean, how many times did you have somebody you referred out and they never knew that you were getting paid to refer? I have. Anybody else done that? Especially way back in the day. They didn't know I was getting paid. I didn't know it was required. I don't know when they changed it, but it is required now. I think it's when the buyer started at closing saying, I don't want to refer it, be paid for that. Okay, we're going to go on with this one. They've changed paragraph 17 to now B2B extension. Paragraph 26, receipt of buyer of consumer brochures, retitled to brochures, that's all. And now paragraph C17, modified, formatted, and added the numbers and added retainer fee. So these are the brochures that they get, or what are the forms that they get, and one of them is F19 with retainer fee, and we don't use it anymore. Yes?
Cathy, back under exclusive buyer brokerage agreement, over to the side of false information, what is the false information? Did I miss that part?
Where are you? What paragraph does it say to the left?
10.
It's handwritten.
It's handwritten.
Okay, disclosures. Remove customers from subsection B and C. Let me look at it a minute. It's now C5. You're looking at my note that I wrote on there,
Yes.
right? And that was C5, B and C. Well, B says broker may not knowingly give false information. And they changed it to customers. They took out customers. They removed customers from that. And also in C. It just refers to B, which refers to false information. But they took out customers. And then what paragraph C says, and the conflict in broker's duty not to give false information, duty to keep the confidence of buyer, the duty not to give false information, self-prevail, and they had customers in there too, and that does not, that was taken out. Okay? Okay, paragraph 26, receipt of buyer or consumer protection brochures. It was retitled to brochures. That's paragraph 26. And when it refers to just the paragraph,
They make this really confusing by
yeah, it's
requiring
now
field
C17. It is very confusing. I'm sorry, it is very confusing. When I took the class, we didn't even have the forms.
It was paragraph last year and now.
Yeah,
it's
it was
17.
26. Now you have to look at it. It is now paragraph C17 brochure. Okay? And that is on page 5. Okay, and they added some brochures to it. They added retainer fee exhibit. Okay, and you can see any brochures, they put GAR in front of the B, B2, B whatever. Are you with me now?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes, ma'am.
What gets confusing is you're looking at where it used to be, and if they say it's changed to, like Michael said, you got to look at, and believe me, I get confused over it too. You got to look at what it's changed, what paragraph it's changed to. I'll try to make a better point in pointing that out to you. And then again, they added the GAR Form 19 retainer fee exhibit, which was not listed on a list of exhibits.
Do a lot of people charge retainer fees?
We're not allowed to.
I know we're not, but do a lot of agents do that?
I don't know.
Okay.
Commercial does.
Yeah,
Commercial?
Commercial does, and when I first started the business with the art company, the person that trained me, she charged a lot of retainer fees. She was a top buyer's agent. charge a lot of retainer fees. But we don't allow it. Commercial does it, but we don't allow it. Not sure why, but I'm told we don't, so. Any questions on the exclusive buyer broker agreement? Because that's it on that one. Any more questions? Are you totally confused now? Hope not.
On the fraud thing, we're gonna have our own document that we always have to include, correct?
I'm sorry.
The fraud, the wire
Yes.
fraud. So
They got beware of
Sticking with
cyber fraud. If it was already on there, they extended and modified the language, hoping that it's clear to the client what it's saying. But our form is very good because it gives them specifics what to do and not what not to do.
Okay.
I had money wired, went to a bank and asked Bank of America, was she aware of cyber fraud? She said, oh, I've never heard of that. I know they did. You're kidding me. Okay. Now, okay, the non-exclusive buyer broker agreement is the same. We're not going to go over that. Changes were the same. F6, agreement with buyer's customer. They added the retainer fee, the beware of cyber fraud. So we're not going to talk about that one. An exclusive leasing listing agreement, marketing, they advertisement, they added language concerning the right to use media to market property and cyber fraud. Those things we've already seen in the other forms, okay? There is a change on exclusive leasing management agreement, paragraph 6C. Owner to maintain minimum required amount in trust account.
And which form we are now?
F8.
When would you use that if you're managing the property, or like why would you use that instead of F7?
Well, if you're owner of the property, you can't manage the property in our office except one person in here that I know of who strictly does property management, unless you're the owner.
So you're saying though not F8 is only if you're a property manager?
So that says that they added language maintaining funds in the broker's account for repairs.
Yeah, but is F8 only used if you're a property manager?
If you're managing the property,
Okay.
if it's referencing somebody else managing the property, then you could use it. I'd have to look at the form, but we do not manage property in this office unless you own it. If you own it, you need to be familiar with it.
Okay.
If you're a property manager, a lot of people own property, investment property, and they manage it. Okay. If it referenced somebody else is going to be manager of the property, then you would use that. Exclusive tenant brokerage agreement F9, remove retainer fee section. Commission, now paragraph 6 was paragraph 7. Everybody with me? Added language that a commission is owed if a tenant purchases or contracts to purchase the leased property. Do you like that one? Wasn't in there before. I used to put in there special stipulations. Now it's in there. And that was paragraph 7. Now it's paragraph 6. Then they added beware of cyber fraud, and in 25 they added paragraph 25. They added paragraph 25 with exhibits. Non-exclusive tenant broker agreement, same thing that we said with the exclusive. Over to the next page, we're looking at F13. Agreement to work with tenant as a customer. The only thing they added there was a paragraph 25, beware of cyber fraud. Same thing for F17. F19 is a retainer fee exhibit. It is a new form. You can look at it if you want. Maybe someday they'll change that. But we don't use it. Okay, now we're going to go to the purchase and sale agreement, F20. And corrected all of the section titles between sections A and B to match. Okay? So in other words, whatever the title is Section A is what? The blanks, where we fill in the blanks. And the same in B is, like if you're looking at A1, purchase and sell, if you look at B1, on page 2, purchase and sell relates to, it's the same name as what's on A1. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Make it less confusing. They added GAR form numbers to any reference form. So if they talk about using a form, they'll give you the name of the form, like a lead-based paint exhibit. They would give you the form number. That's nice. Closing in possession A4, you'll see they combined both A and B, where it's a closing and possession date. All in paragraph 4. Really no reason to be in a separate paragraph. Everybody agree? Everybody follow me? Okay. Holder of earnest money. This is the new one. A5. They have added, if holder is closing attorney, you must use F84A, and F84B must be signed by closing attorney. We will go over that form. Used to be a form called escrow agent is holder of earnest money, and they realized that most people in here didn't know what they were talking about because our escrow agent is an attorney, right? I mean, they really are considered like the escrow agent. So it's an attorney as holder of earnest money. And have you heard me say before, we do not like attorneys to hold earnest money?
Yes.
Okay. They've done a good job of fixing this to a certain extent, that the attorney has to sign the F84B, and he agrees he's going to comply with the requirements of the holder of the earnest money in the contract, who normally is a broker. Before they didn't. They could do whatever they wanted to release them. No 10-day letters, make their own decision, didn't matter. Now they agree to follow the terms of the contract, which will be in paragraph 5 and 7 of the purchase and sell agreement. One talks about late earnest money, one talks about earnest money disputes, okay? Attorneys now, if he agrees to be holder, we're gonna talk about that. There's a process you gotta go through for the attorney to be the holder of earnest money, but we're not there yet. Lead-based paint, they just added GAR form, the name of the GAR form to use. That is in paragraph A9. It's paragraph 9 on the first page. Okay, it tells you attach F84, the form to use. Broker relationships in this transaction, A10, in A and B2, that's at the blank at the bottom form. They changed the wording to working with buyer as a customer. I think it just said buyer as a customer. Now it says working with buyer as a customer, just a better clarification. Especially if you're the listing agent and you're working with a buyer that's not represented, just kind of clarifies that you're working with them as a customer. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. I mean, I didn't make the change, but I'm just assuming that's why they changed it, just to make it feel better to especially a seller or vice versa. Because we do not do dual agency, right?
Correct.
Consent to share non-public information, A12. Does anybody know what that used to be?
That like ELTA thing, right?
Yeah, it's not on there anymore. And the attorney talked about this when she taught the class, and she's like, guess we'll have to go back to the special stipulation. I went through the special stipulations, and there's not one for it.
This is section B.
So I guess, attorneys are just going to give them to us. Now, if you run into a problem, we came out with a special stipulation when they added this. I think it was actually 2016, right? When 2016?
Something like that.
When we went to the fun TRID stuff.
I think they're sending just the buyer stuff or the seller stuff, which kind of accomplishes.
Yeah, but
In
the ALTA,
advance,
but the
but the
ALTA,
final
but the
ALTA
ALTA shows
is
both sides of the transaction to the seller. Okay.
So do we need to go back and pull that old stip until they change it, or?
Yeah, I'm gonna ask about that. I'm going to ask Charlie Pollard about it because there was a big discussion. Excuse me, are there questions back there?
They were just asking what it used to say at the bottom.
Okay. I just don't hear well. I get distracted. I'm a high eye. But we used to have it when they came out with TRID, because in TRID they said that the disclosure only information for the buyer only goes to the buyer. So then they had a special stip that they gave us to write in there. Then they added it to the form in 2017. Now they've taken it out. So I got to find out from Charlie Pollard and Lynn McCraw, do we really need a special stip? If we do, I will send that to you. Okay? Items paid by buyer, that was B3A, and now it's B3B. So we're on the second page.
Yeah.
And in B4B, they added, and this is on page 3, is everybody with me? Closing possession, 4, keys and openers. They added that at time of possession, seller shall provide buyer with all keys, door openers. That was in there. But what they added is, if buyer's possession is after closing, seller shall provide buyer with one set of keys to the property at closing and all keys at the time of possession. Does that make sense?
Yes.
You don't have to give everything to the buyer until they actually take possession of the property. They're letting the seller stay in after closing. Paragraph 5, that's not referenced in here, but I'm going to reference this because it's holder of earnest money. That is a paragraph you need to become familiar with, especially if the attorney's holding the earnest money, because this is what they're supposed to do. And you may even have to let them know what they're supposed to do. Because they may not be reading it, I hope they do. I mean, our attorneys do, but what their duties are. Because they are obligated to paragraph 5 and paragraph 7, which they were not obligated to before they signed the F84B, which we'll go over.
And that's if they're holding the earnest money, we're getting to sign it.
Yeah, that's if the attorney's holding the earnest money. I'm just letting you know what their duties are, is contained in paragraph 5 and paragraph 7 of the purchase and sale agreement. Because I tell you, most agents don't know because there's earnest money dispute, or earnest money is late, right? What do? Earnest money's late, and so my buyer didn't turn in earnest
You
money.
have to notify everybody.
Yeah, well, that's basically what 5 says.
Yeah.
And the person gets in trouble is the holder, not anybody, not the buyer. Buyer turns it on, well, the buyer would get in, we have to notify them. We don't notify them, then we are liable for not notifying them.
Right.
Okay? So we need to know, we need you to keep track when earnest money's turned in. Because if it's turned in late, we don't always know it's turned in late unless you've uploaded your contract to the loop, you submitted the earnest money, and Rachel's had a chance to go through and check the contract and see when it's due. Okay? But if it's late, you need to let me know or let them know that it's late, and they'll tell you what you need to do, which is an amendment to the contract. But you're supposed to notify all parties. The buyer has so many days to make good on it. And if they don't, then the seller can terminate, which is contained in this paragraph. But this is not a class on earnest money, but I'm just telling you it's contained in paragraph 5 and 7 so you know what the attorney is required to do. Is everybody with me?
Yep.
Okay. They added C5, beware of cyber fraud, subsequent paragraphs renumbered, and then C5, exhibits and addenda. There was new paragraph 6, modified list of exhibits, and added form numbers, which are on the brochures. And this is on page, we have a list of the exhibits. you added the retainer fee, and then they put, the form number on there for all the exhibits. Is that helpful? Okay. So that's the purchase and sale agreement. Any questions on purchase and sale agreement? Are we good? You know everything you need to know. Don't be calling me with questions.
Sure we will.
No, I want you to. That's what I'm here for. Everybody have a job. Okay, we are going to move on. I'm going to talk a little bit about the new construction purchase and sale agreement. Somebody came up to me. I think it was Courtney, so she wrote. What was your question about the new construction agreement?
Golly. Sorry, I'm still in a haze from,
Trying to figure this out?
No, it was, give me a second, I'll come back to you.
Okay.
Before you
Yes.
answer, I just wanted to clarify, we were asking one question when we were schmoozing. Just tell me if you can tell me now, the binding agreement date, is it the last person, like, the last person that signs binds it, or the last person that signs sends it to the other person and the other person binds it?
Binding agreement date is, and it is defined in the contract, and I'll show you where it's defined in the contract. It's defined in the purchase and sale agreement. It has detail when it's the binding agreement date. It is, for some reason, one of the most difficult things for agents to grasp. It's like it calls about it all the time. And I had one person sell a house twice because they misunderstood what's binding. You really need to know it. If I send you a counteroffer, your client signs it, you put the binding agreement date on the date they sign it. When's the binding agreement date?
When you get it back.
Right, when I get it back signed, within the time limits, unaltered. Anybody changes anything, I don't care what they change on that form, there are a few things you can change that's not pertaining to the contract for the buyer or seller.
Right.
So they have to know what date they got it back, then they're the ones that bind it.
Actually, the person that should put the binding agreement, anybody can put it on there. That's what Georgia Associated Realtor says. Anybody can put it on there. But if it's not correct, you should verify it's correct, then you need to send notification binding agreement date GAR form. And you need to get it clarified. So the binding agreement date is when the last offeror receives their offer signed and receives it back unchanged with signatures on it within the time limits.
Okay, so if I submitted an offer to the seller accepted it, they signed it, they should send it back to me. They could bind it then and send it back to me, so when?
Nobody binds it. Okay, here's the reason I'm saying that. It even says in the contract, we do not have the authority to bind it, we put a date on there. Binding is by definition of the actions of the buyer and seller. Because when it's received. And, you know, this is what happened when somebody sold a house twice, because they said that their buyer signed off on it, and they sent it back to our agent, and they told our agent to bind it. And our agent said, we got another offer we want to accept, and we don't want to bind it. I said, you don't bind it. You got it back. It's binding. I'm sure we put the date on it or not. Does it make sense?
But the last person that actually signs it usually puts the date on.
Exactly.
Because you
The
can't
person,
do it
when
without
the last person that gets it back signed,
Right.
not the last person that signs it. Because if I send it to you, my client's already signed it, and then your client sign it, they're the last people to sign it. They could sign it today, you could not send it back to me till 2 days from now. When's the binding agreement date?
2
That's
days
right,
from today.
2 days from today. They get it back.
But you
And
would need
believe
them,
me.
you would need
When
them
you
to
receive
re-sign
it.
it though.
Pardon?
Like if you're using .loop, you would need them to re-sign it because it doesn't let you edit the document. So like how I think of it, if you're using .loop, the last person to have the last person sign it puts that date in.
Actually, the person with the date on it is the person that receives it back. If I send it to you, your client sign it.
Right.
Unless I get it back signed,
Mhm.
it's not binding.
Correct.
Okay? Once I get it back signed, .loop does not allow you to make any changes, right?
Right.
Right.
So you have to save it as a PDF, download it, and then add the box with the date. Then
Binding date.
by signature date at the bottom. But you gotta add, you gotta drag down where you could. Does everybody understand? Yeah. Or either you you print it out, write it in, and upload it. And you better make sure the other agent gets it when you put the binding date on there. Because what if they disagree with you? Okay?
And in this case, we don't need to send a binding agreement form.
You do not have to. However, Georgia Associates of Realtors, when they came out with their form in 2016, recommend we always use it. Because both agents sign and buyer and seller sign, and there is no confusion when it's a binding date. And if there's an earnest money dispute and timeline, and people don't agree what the binding date was, it's a mess.
I usually send the important date.
Got a million of them.
That is important date.
Right, right.
I'm sure.
Okay, is everybody okay on binding date?
Yeah.
If you don't, call me.
Is
Send me an email, call me.
is that one of those things? So I always send over important dates with signed contract, all of that. So if it turns out that the other agent put the binding agreement, or if like I make a mistake and it's listed wrong, but they've had that important date sitting in their inbox for 9 days, whatever, we're at end of due diligence, it's still wrong, we're just taking a week to find it, or is it, okay, you had all this information, you didn't catch it, we're moving forward with the mistake that's written on the
That's a
contract?
great question. It doesn't change what the real binding agreement date is.
Okay.
Because you sent over a form that you put what you could consider the binding agreement date, it still doesn't change the binding or what the actual binding agreement date is. Because sometimes when we get an earnest money dispute and I gotta write a 10-day letter, there is no binding agreement date on there. What I have to look at is what was the date and time of the signature, who's the last person that signed it.
That's the binding date, right?
No, it's really that's not proof, because the last person that signed it's got to send it back to the person that made the offer. Do you see what a mess it creates if you don't put a binding agreement date on there? And believe me, I've had arguments over the earnest money about the time limits because there was no binding agreement date put on there, and then they're arguing what's the binding date. And then I gotta get emails as to when you received it. You say, I didn't receive it back to the day after they signed it, then I gotta get the email from you showing when you received it. Does that make sense? You didn't use, that's why .loop is great, because .loop will tell us. Yes.
So you're saying that if I'm the last person to sign, I still leave the binding agreement date empty and let the recipient fill that?
That's the way it should be done.
Okay.
That's the way it should be done.
So if it's not done that way, then what does that mean? That it's not
Doesn't mean
accurate?
anything. Georgia Associates of Realtors says anybody put a date, it's a date. But
if you put the date in there when you sent
Right.
it, you sent it, so
you're
obviously
assuming
you
they got it
assume
that
they
day.
receive it, and received is in the inbox, doesn't mean they
It's
have
not
to open.
incorrect. It's not incorrect. However, the person that really should do it, who knows the date they received it, is a person that ought to put the date on there, but it doesn't have to be.
Gotcha.
Have buyers and sellers put the date on there. Doesn't matter if it's correct. It's a date.
Right.
Somebody wrote a date, but the binding date is by definition a contract of when it's binding by the actions of the parties.
Right.
That's why it gets confusing. And if people use RE forms, it doesn't say binding, it says acceptance date. Don't use them. Rewrite the contract. Okay, so we're through with the purchase and sale agreement. The counteroffer, same thing. They combined closing and possession, holder of earnest money. They added the language to use the F84A and B if it's an attorney. And then they put closing law firm, changed to closing attorney law firm. Why they did that, I don't know, but maybe attorneys like it. And then they added an extra page to the form. So now you got another page, extra page to the counteroffer form. Actually, I haven't looked at it, but I guess it's room if you want to write, because you have such a small space to write things in there. Gives you more room. You got an extra page on it. New construction purchase and sale agreement. I didn't give you that as a handout. That's F23. They corrected all of the section titles between sections A and B to match. A is the blanks, B is the description. Added GAR form numbers, we already said that. We're going to look down here where it says to the left, B8B, return and disbursement of earnest money. Disbursement of earnest money when held by holder added along with any construction deposit being held by seller. So not only is there earnest money, it says construction deposit. Now this is the new construction purchase and sale agreement. So now it says construction deposit. You don't have somebody that's there call it a construction deposit. Sometimes they call it earnest money, but they're using construction cost deposit and earnest money kind of like to mean the same thing.
Okay, so
Unless it's defined as non-refundable.
remember what the question was. Okay, so we're under contract for a 2018 GAR form. The sellers did a seller's disclosure, a builder's disclosure, but it stated 2017 GAR. Do I have to get the builder to update and fill out the 2018?
He should, if you're using the 2018 form,
Yeah.
he should do it on the 2018.
None of us can
Because
find
we're,
it.
you know,
Okay.
we know that when you list something, you may list it in 2017, right? So I got it. I mean, it's not that you have to,
Right.
but should.
Okay. This is only if the builder doesn't have their own purchase and sale agreement, right?
Right, most of them do, don't they?
Yeah, it's the
And who is it written by?
Their attorney.
Their attorney. And who does it protect? The builder. Okay. And we're not going to go over anything else on that. The lot and purchase and sale agreement, same thing. Combined closing and possession, combined them. There's really nothing in here that's changed that was not changed on the regular purchase and sale agreement. We're going to go over to page 4, F30, lease for lease purchase exhibit in smoking. A9, you do not have that form. I'm going to print out every single form. A9, they added smoking in any form. And it's clarified on another one when it talks about vaping and e-cigarettes are considered smoking. I don't do it, so I don't know what it is. But we all know it's done, that it's considered smoking. Okay, so that's what I say. And then they added the very bottom, C11 exhibits. It's now C12. And the list of exhibits added form numbers were applicable and added consent to take pictures and video of property. You're going to see that on all the forms now. Give the authority to take videos and pictures. Okay. Same thing on condominium resale purchase and sale agreement. Nothing. Only change on that is to change the word "paw" to "pay" was a typo. No real changes on the land and purchase and sale agreement. The F40 lease for residential property, smoking, they added in any form. Propensity of flooding, A19 added at least. I haven't looked at that, so I'm not sure what they mean at least. Lead-based paint, they gave the number. Brokerage relationships in this transaction, same thing that they did on the purchase and sale agreement, saying that the buyer is a customer. Working with buyer as customer. Smoking, B9. They added the language that vaping and e-cigarettes are considered smoking. Okay, so that's what they said. Smoking in any form on F30. Then when you got to do the lease, because if you do a lease purchase, you got to do the lease, and it says vaping and e-cigarettes. Okay, manager, B26. Now B25B. Added language that management agreement is incorporated by reference. So there's a management agreement, or if you're using the other form that has lease, management agreement is incorporated by reference. Disclaimer. C5C to your left is a column. neighborhood conditions, added National Clandestine Laboratory Register information. That's under conditions of the property. You might know what that has.
So like a meth lab?
Yeah.
No.
I didn't know till the attorney told me, but that's what it is. They can go look up if there's a meth lab. And that came up, but somebody asked me about that. Okay, somebody was renting property, you're making an offer to buy property. That's where you find it.
What is it again? Can you repeat that?
National Clandestine Laboratory Register information. So there's been registered anywhere where there's been a meth lab. I guess some of them are, legally, there are illegal ones out there. So I guess if they know about it, they've been arrested.
Legal
But that's added in there. It's not on the purchase and sale agreement, but it is on the lease for residential property. So if you have somebody in a purchase and sale agreement wants to know about it, tell them they can go to that registry. I have a question for you. Let's came up. Are you required to disclose if somebody was murdered when you list a house?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is a form. There's a step for that.
Which, by the way, I've had sellers ask me, this is a good story. They asked, should we disclose if we think our house is haunted? And I said, well, let me tell you about the disclosure and the stigmatized property. And, we went through the whole spiel. And I said, is there anything that you're disclosing? And they looked at each other and looked back at me and were like, no.
Okay.
The little boy had to tell me why his door was padlocked.
Yeah.
Oh no. Oh god.
No, you do not have to disclose.
Like, I don't wanna hear it.
Property.
Yeah,
Georgia law,
Don't tell me,
because
don't
I
tell
had
me.
to look this up because this was a horrible, violent murder where the kids bludgeoned and slit the throats of their grandparents.
Oh, someone posted that.
Was that in Gwinnett County?
Yeah.
I think it was, and our agent found out on Raw's Facebook page asking for a buyer's agent. She says, you know what, I usually don't give the address of the property, this time I did, and somebody says, are you where? And she looked it up, Googled it, sure enough, and I looked it up because I said, well, how were they killed? Because she didn't know. And then when I saw how violent it was, would you buy the house?
Heck no.
So they lost earnest money.
No way.
I don't like Georgia law on that, but it's something if your buyer's agent, maybe your buyers want to ask that question. Did anybody die on this property? They say yes. How did they die? They do not have to disclose if they died from what?
No. Cancer.
No.
AIDS.
AIDS.
Yeah.
They're protected. Yep.
Right. That's
Okay.
Yeah.
That's under fair housing, which I will be teaching this year.
What about other natural causes? I think cancer is.
Anything else except that? To say it was natural
Does
causes.
anyone use that stip that, there's a stip in there that's a standard language that says the seller has to disclose if anybody died.
Special stip in what?
Special stip.
To be used
I
with
just
what?
was curious that anybody uses it. Have you ever
To be
seen it?
used with what though?
You would add
On the
it in
purchase
as
and
a
sale
buy-
agreement?
Yeah, the purchase and sale
Yeah, okay.
agreement.
I've never heard of anybody using it, but Drew can tell you there is a stip on it.
I don't know. I mean, there is a step. Someone must use it.
I would ask. I'd ask when I walk through the property or when my buyer's going to make an offer if the buyer wants to know. But in this case, who would think about it? And I felt really sorry for our client, but what are you going to do?
I sold the Corpus now. 3 murders, 1. People now?
Well, the recommendation was, because I researched the law on it, because it was like a Sunday night, she called me about it, and I researched it. There were 2 articles written by attorneys, and they said that you really should disclose it.
Wait, so
Why go under contract and go through all of this? And then if the buyer closes and finds out, even though you're not required to, they may still try to sue you.
So if the person had AIDS, you said they don't have to disclose it?
No,
They don't
not
have to-
supposed to.
They don't have to disclose it. Like, so if they say that someone died, you can say no, or you say yes, but you don't have to say the cause.
You just say, yes, somebody died on the property.
And if they say how, you just
How
say
to say natural causes.
I'm just curious, not that I.
That knife was awful.
Huh?
I just said look at the news.
Yes.
Like a sharp knife.
when you're taking a listing, you don't ask that to the sellers unless they disclose it. Somebody really asks, does anybody wants to own?
Well, the seller's one has to disclose it, so.
What if they don't say anything?
If you don't know, you don't know. But if the buyer asks you, then you gotta go ask the seller. Okay, we're gonna move on. F45, notice is to be used in a lease transactions. You know, there is a unilateral notice that you can use a purchase and sale agreement. There wasn't one to give a unilateral notice for leases because they always refer to the binding agreement date of purchase and sale agreement. So this one, they have a new form for leases. It's a unilateral notice. And then there's a new form, consent to take pictures and video property, new form, which is to be used with, up here for F30. F50, seller's property disclosure, covenants, fees, and assessments. They always love to change this form, the CAD form.
Yeah.
Change community association disclosures to community associated fees and disclosure. And they changed the form number from 123 to F55, and we will go through that form. They always change that form. And the reason is there's so much confusion of who pays what. So they're trying to clarify what the buyer has to pay, what the seller has to pay. Fixtures checklist, they added without freezer after refrigerator. Go figure that one out. Okay. I guess because sometimes there's not a freezer with them, right?
Hey, Cathy.
I guess.
What about FaceTiming? I had a question on F46. Do you have to use that if you're like doing a showing and you're FaceTiming?
No. What do you mean?
Like FaceTiming.
On iPhone.
To who? With who? I mean, FaceTiming who?
With your buyers.
Consent to take you can actually record a video. You can't record a video?
Well,
That's covered. I FaceTime all the time, out-of-town buyers.
Sometimes there's an out-of-town buyer. That's the
right.
question.
Okay, I understand now. So you're FaceTiming them.
So do you
But the
have to-
consent's given to the listing agent, not to you.
Oh. So I don't have to like fill.
You might ask that agent that you're going to do that. Let them know that you're going to do that.
F50 features, that's gonna cause a problem.
It's not safe to.
Because refrigerators have freezers. I think what they meant to do is exclude freezers from refrigerator.
I think that's where they put it. I haven't looked at the form, but
Well,
I
it
think
says
that's
without, W-O.
It adds
without
more
freezer
options.
after refrigerator.
Okay.
You're saying refrigerator without freezer.
So the options are on there now if you have all three of them.
It's a separate,
It's
not
separate
like an
checkbox,
add-on.
refrigerator and then refrigerator without.
Yeah.
Oh, right. That's separate.
There's
checkbox?
two.
Done.
There's a refrigerator and a refrigerator without
Okay,
freezer.
okay.
And then they added vanity hanging mirror to list. I like that. Do you like that?
I love that.
Okay. But again, that's on the seller's property disclosure, and you want to read it if you're a buyer's agent, and you make sure your buyers read it, so there's no confusion. If there's any questions you need to ask.
It's now online.
Instructions at closing, to closing attorney, I don't see that on the 2018 GAR forms. Is that been removed?
What?
The instructions to closing attorney.
You're saying there's not a form?
Because I was looking for it and I couldn't find it. But I went back to 2017 and I'm like, oh, it is here, but it's not in 2018.
I'll have to look. I may have brought the list with me, but I'll look and see. I see nothing on here that was eliminated. Is it still instructions? Is that still the name of the form, instruction code? There's another name to it. What is it?
I looked it up that way, I couldn't find it.
It's agreement to
Did you look it on FMLS?
commission.
On that look,
No,
most of the time.
I don't think it's called instruction to close attorney. We'll look it
Most of
up.
the time
We'll
you
look it
don't
up.
see that.
Because there's nothing in here.
Everything.
You don't?
No.
It's
go
commission
FMLS.
agreement.
FMLS is
It's
better.
commission agreement. Does everybody agree?
Isn't it still instructions to closing attorney?
I think
It
it's
was
called.
in 2017.
Was it?
Yeah.
Instruction.
I'll have to
It's
look it
still-
up. I'll look and see. There's nothing in here saying there was eliminated, so I will look and see. And if
It's
it
still
is, I'll find out.
F32, instructions to closing attorney in our docs. So it might not have been copied over to .loop, but it's still the exact same in
Shame
in
on
our
that.
docs.
Okay.
We use that form all the time. Might be under something other than interactive forms, but I'll check on that. Good point. Okay, F52, seller's property disclosure statement, condominium. You know, there's a separate one for condominiums. Instructions to seller completing the form. They change F123 to F55, and the new form name, Community Association Disclosure to Community Association Fees and Disclosures, and related issues. They lengthened it. Okay, we're going to the next page. We're doing good on time. How's everybody so far? Any questions? If you have any after the class, email me and call me, okay? Because it does get a little bit confusing. And a lot of this is not going to register with you till you start using the form, right? That's why I gave you copies of the forms, the most important forms that we use, so you can make notes on it. Because I know I've gone to the class and said, wait a minute, what did they say? I can't remember what changed. I gotta go look it up. And I don't like looking it up on this form, what the changes are, because it's confusing. If you got your own form, you're making notes on it, you'll know what's changed. I hope you're doing that. That's why I copied them for you. All 50 copies I made. Okay, we're going over to the loan contingency exhibits, and that is the last page. Well, it's page 5. There is another. We got a couple of more to go through here. Okay. One of the things they added to the community association, to the loan contingency exhibit, and that is on the FHA, the conventional, and the VA. And we're going to go over that. That is great. The seller's right to terminate after the financing contingency is up. And we're going to go through that. I included the VA loan contingency exhibit because there were more changes on that one. The FHA, the only thing they changed on that is they retitled the paragraphs. Okay?
Is that
and they did add new section, seller's right to terminate, that I just talked about, which is paragraph 8, and then they had to when they add a paragraph, they had to renumber all the subsequent paragraphs. And they gave them new names. But we're not going to go through them, they just gave the title of the paragraph a different name.
To get these new forms, are they in the logo section yet, or do we have to go to GAR?
As far as I know, they are not we still do not have the 2018 on the KW logo forms. So you need to go to GAR Interactive Forms. And we'll make sure your commission agreement's there somewhere. Kind of important. Okay, everybody with me on FHA? We're going to go in detail of the seller's right to terminate. But FHA, the only thing that changed on that are the titles, and they added seller's right to terminate. We're going to go through in the VA exhibit, okay? Same thing, conventional loan exhibit. They added a new section, paragraph 8, and all subsequent paragraphs renumbered. Okay. Now I gave you the loan exhibit. Turn to page 2. We always had paragraph 7, right of seller requests evidence of buyer's ability to close. That was always on there. But they didn't have the, they had the who, what, when, but then they didn't say if not, what then. That's the rules of special stipulations of contracts. Somebody's supposed to do something, they don't do it, you're supposed to have if not, then what happens, what are the consequences. There were no consequences on there if the buyer didn't furnish it. Because if you look at paragraph 7, it says, if the financing contingency ends without buyer terminating this agreement, seller shall have the right, but not the obligation, to request that buyer provide seller with written evidence of buyer's financial ability to purchase the property evidence. A copy of a loan commitment letter from each institutional mortgage loan from whom buyer is seeking mortgage financing to purchase the property, stating the type, amount, and terms of the loans and the conditions for the fundings, the loan shall be deemed sufficient evidence. So that's anybody they've applied with. Okay, the provision of such evidence is not a guarantee that the mortgage loans will be funded or that the buyer will close. That's been in there for a long time. Buyer shall have 7 days from the date seller delivers notice. Now remember, there's a unilateral notice GAR form. I'll talk about that because they added it now, a unilateral notice for leases. There's a unilateral notice GAR form that your seller should sign, you should sign, and reference paragraph 7, the finance contingency, and that seller is asking per paragraph 7, right, if seller requests evidence of buyer's ability to close, for a loan commitment letter. And you can ask for it after the financing contingency ends, because I get calls all the time of people saying, you know, we don't think they're going to get approved for the loan. Financing contingency's up. Information I've got appears they're not going to get the ability to get the loan. But it stopped right there at paragraph 7. So it says buyers have 7 days from the date seller delivers notice to buyer requesting such evidence. The priest is saying no request of such evidence shall be made by seller less than 7 days from the date of closing. But if they don't give it, what happens? It doesn't tell you. And a long discussion with our qualifying broker is, okay, so the seller asks for it, they don't give it to them, then what happens? Doesn't say, right? So I love paragraph 8 because it says seller's right to terminate. This is added. In the event buyer fails to provide seller with the evidence of buyer's ability to close within the time frame set forth above, seller shall notify buyer of the default. They're terminated at default because the buyer didn't give them the evidence. Buyer's in default. And give buyer 3 days from the date of the delivery of the notice to cure the default of same. So, buyer has 7 days. If they didn't give it, so you got to wait 7 days. The buyer doesn't give you evidence, then the seller needs to immediately give buyer notice of buyer's default and give buyer 3 days from the date of delivery of the notice to cure the same. Now, I guess the time limits get very confusing. That's a total of 10 days, right? If buyer does not timely cure the default, buyer's in default because they didn't give them the evidence or their ability to close. Seller may terminate his agreement within 7 days thereafter. So you get 10 days, you didn't get it. 7 days, they're supposed to give it. Then you give them notice, you got 3 more days to give it, you're in default. Then after those 3 days you don't get it. Then seller may terminate his agreement, but you got to do it within 7 days of those 10 days. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. So really it's like a 17-day
Well, actually it'd be 11th day. Seller could terminate on the 11th day.
Oh right, if it dragged out, so.
Yeah. But they just don't want the seller to come back and, 3 weeks down the road, long term out to closing and say, oh, by the way, you didn't give me that evidence, so I'm going to terminate. There's got to be a time limit. There always should be a time limit. Something's supposed to occur. Anytime something in a contract, somebody's got to do something, there should be a time limit when it should be done by. And if they don't do it, then what are the consequences? And they weren't in there. It was on paragraph 7.
And that's proof that they're going to be able to get the loan, or just for the financial contingency? Did you say financial?
Proof, evidence that they can get the loan, is what it says.
Okay.
Or a loan commitment letter. Now, we're going to get into what the heck does this say, or is this good enough, because it doesn't really define it other than a loan commitment letter.
So in that situation, the seller, if he terminates within the time frame, he keeps the earnest money?
He doesn't have it. The broker has it. And the broker, then the parties have to sign off. The seller can terminate and request the earnest money. If the buyer doesn't sign it, then whoever's the holder of the earnest money has to write a 10-day letter or file an interpleader with the court. Okay? So seller doesn't automatically get it. Buyer's got to agree. Buyer doesn't agree, then we got to do a 10-day letter. Yes, Michael?
What happens if the closing date is prior to the 10 days? Does the closing date automatically push to the 10 days?
Says he can't ask for no request, buyer shall have 7 days. No request for such evidence shall be made by seller less than 7 days from the date of closing. That's in paragraph 7. So in other words, you can't ask for it. If closing is supposed to happen within 7 days or 6 days, you can't ask for it. So you better do it before then.
So it sounds like we would have to make sure
Because
that
7 days, after 7 days, hopefully they're going to be closing.
Why would you just put in there you don't get your earnest money back?
Not under VA.
Because the contract says in paragraph 7, It says the buyer's in default. That's the key word in there, right?
Right.
Buyer's in default, okay? Even if the buyer terminates during due diligence, who's supposed to get the earnest money?
Buyer.
But if the seller doesn't sign the notice to terminate and agreeing the buyer gets it, then if we're the holder, we have to write a 10-day letter. Okay, so they don't outright say it, but they say they're in default. Saying they're in default is a clue right there. It's a big clue. If you're in default, you lose your earnest money.
So 7 is saying they can only ask for it after the financing contingency. Is that what it's saying?
Yes. You have to wait till it's up.
And then 8 only only applies if 7 happens. Right?
Yeah, 8 applies if they didn't give it to you within 7 days.
Okay.
Then 3 more days, or you give them a unilateral notice, and they have 3 days to give it to you, and they still didn't give it to you. Your seller has 7 days to terminate and request earnest money.
His question is exactly what is happening right now. My buyer, not my, representing the sellers, but nothing's happening. We're at the closing date tomorrow. They've still not obtained financing.
Yeah.
Did I just email you? And I mean, what's next?
What's next is you can either send a mutual agreement to terminate purchase and sell agreement, because if your seller terminates today, they're in default. You gotta wait till you get past closing.
Okay.
Then the buyer's in default because they didn't close.
Right.
But did they notify you that they didn't get, don't they have to notify also?
No.
And note about,
Only if the seller asks though.
No, she didn't use this paragraph.
Yeah, this paragraph is not.
They didn't request for evidence. But please, the agent called you up and said they're not going to get financing. They've been turned down. I just had this call today. What do we do?
Notify.
It's a tough situation because unless the buyer terminates, that house is still off the market. When if seller terminates just because somebody verbally told you they didn't get their loan, it's not reason to terminate. You got to have it in writing, and the buyer has to terminate.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? And if in doubt, call me. We don't want your sellers to be in default when the buyer can't even get financing. So you either, I'll answer your question because Doug called me about this already. I think that's the one you're talking about. And you had a buyer. Are you going to have the buyer in the house before closing?
My question though is, they were signed in 2017, and this is a 2018 contract.
Yeah, I talked to Doug about that. 2017 contract, this does not apply unless it's in writing. You can ask for, I did tell him, paragraph 7's in there. Your seller can ask for evidence that the buyer can close, but it doesn't really say if they don't give it. Are they in default or they're not?
So this doesn't override 17.
No. Wish it did. Nope. But you can't send over a mutual termination agreement. But he said they already sent over a mutual termination and said the buyer should get earnest money. That's a negotiation tactic, you know. If you tell the other agent and you know your buyer's not going to get financing and closing's 2 weeks out, one way you may be able to get your buyer's earnest money back and they're outside the financing contingency is tell the agent, look, instead of your seller keeping the house off the market for 2 or 3 weeks, whatever it is, if you'll get earnest money back to my buyer, we'll terminate today. Otherwise, we don't have to terminate. And seller can't terminate. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So it's a negotiation tactic to send it over, and so you can put your house back in the market now if you give us the earnest money back. And it's a negotiation, you can split it.
So,
All right, I talked to Doug about that today.
So when they're asking for the evidence, is that just, there's no form for that, it's just like an email?
It says, it describes it, it says a copy of a loan commitment from each institution mortgage lender from whom buyer is seeking a mortgage.
Right, but I'm saying when the listing agent is asking the buyer's agent for that, it's not like a form, it's just like it's just
a loan commitment letter.
No, she's saying the
No.
request. Right, like when they're requesting it, it's not.
Use a unilateral notice GAR form. The GAR form called unilateral notice.
Okay, got
Called
it.
notice. The GAR form called notice. Really need to become familiar with that form because any time that there's certain areas of the contract where you're supposed to give notice and an email from you may not be considered notice because your client hadn't signed it. Use the legal form notice, and there is a GAR form for that, and that's the form you'd use. And all you gotta do is reference paragraph 7 and sellers requesting the buyer's ability to close from the lender. Per paragraph 7 of the financing contingency exhibit. Okay? Okay, paragraph 13, which is now paragraph 14. They added in this VA form, it's very confusing about what the seller is going to pay, but they did add, notwithstanding any provision of the contrary contained in this agreement or in any exhibit attached here to, you can't override what VA, federal government says, the law, you can't override it. Seller shall pay all the following amounts to the extent the same are charged as part of this transaction, even if they exceed seller's contribution at closing. So on this form, you have in B under 14, any other fees and costs and charges which are not permitted or allowed by VA to be paid by buyer. The above costs are or are not included in the items paid by seller at closing. Which one would you, if you represent the seller, want to be checked? Are. Because otherwise they're contributing closing costs and they're paying these additional fees. But what this says, that if they exceed what the seller's contribution closing costs are, even if you say they're included, the seller may have to pay even more. So what the closing attorney said is, make sure your seller understands and has some contribution to closing costs. They're going to have to do it anyway in the contract. Does it make sense? How much it's going to be? I don't know, because I get different answers from different lenders on this part anyway. One of them told me, oh, that doesn't apply anymore. If it doesn't apply anymore, why is it still on here? We are on the last page of the VA exhibit, and we're on 14, and I'm referencing where they added that even if the cost exceed, there's certain required contributions to closing the seller has to pay per VA regulations. And they're all listed right here in A. If you want to know what they are, read A, 14A, and tell you all that stuff that they expect the seller to pay. Okay? One of them is a termite, and I will tell you, VA requires a termite letter. So if you're representing the seller, if you're representing the buyer, you might say still that the seller will provide a termite clearance letter day within 30 days of closing at no expense to buyer. So the seller knows they got to do it. Does that make sense? Because VA is going to require one. They're the only one that requires it. And then if you represent the seller, you want to say the above reference costs, this is in B, are or are not included. You would want it to say they are included, because if they're not included, then the seller's going to pay all this stuff, plus if they say they're going to pay $5,000 in closing costs.
So what typically does those items run for?
I don't know. And I just said, I have no idea. And I get different responses from a lender. Go talk to a lender. And I will tell you this, just be sure if you're the listing agent that lender knows how to do VA loans, because I can tell you who's had experience with VA loans. There are some people, they are clueless how to do VA loans. Right, Michael? VA loans.
I don't do them, so I don't. I'm not listening to the other side.
Hey, when I first got into business, nobody did VA or FHA because they get 100% financing anyway. Call them ninja loans. You know what those are?
Yes,
No income, no jobs or assets. It's just a loan. True. That's why everything
Maybe
fell apart in
what is
2009.
it?
Still
Whatever that thing is.
Ninja loans. No income, no job or assets.
You still had to fog the mirror.
Yeah. The joke was if you could fog a mirror, you could get a loan. You're still alive.
The VA isn't there.
Okay, we're gonna move on. Home warranty.
Sorry, quick question on that one. When it says on the 14, even if they exceed seller's contribution, it's been a while since I've done a VA, so that's where like if there's like a 3%, 6% interested party cap, is that saying that these still count even if we cross that 3, 6, 9, whatever that threshold
You can't
is?
circumvent a VA regulation. So
Okay.
if it exceeds what the seller's contributing, all these costs, what VA is saying, so sorry, you got paid $5,000 plus, it's not enough to cover all these things. First thing they got listed is termite letter, and I can tell you they're going to require a termite letter.
Yes, they are.
And if you're a buyer's agent or a listing agent, you got VA financing, I can tell you from experience, there are good lenders that have experience doing VA loans, and there are some that aren't. And you could be wasting your time. First thing, they got to have a certificate of eligibility to even get a VA loan. And if you're the listing agent, I would ask if they have a VA certificate of eligibility to get the loan. Just because they're a veteran doesn't mean they're eligible to get the loan. There's a lot of things that go into that, and the price that they can buy. That's another topic which you can come in and discuss. Added title home warranty. It's now paragraph 15, home warranty, and they just said if it's required. Okay, if there's improvements on the property that are less than 1 year old at time of closing. That means we added a garage to the property. You gotta have a warranty. The VA wants one. Seller shall, if required by VA, to provide a home warranty certificate to VA at seller's cost.
So the VA appraiser will tell you that that's required?
Pardon?
Like, it says, if required by VA, so the VA appraiser will
The
tell
lender
you
will
that's
tell you.
required?
Oh, let's back up to page 2, paragraph 13. Certain repairs paid by seller. Paragraph 13 on page 2. What I love about the VA form, if you fill this out, this says that if the appraiser comes out and says there's certain repairs that have to be done prior to closing, this is how much the seller agrees they'll pay for those repairs. Does that make sense? And they got to be done before closing. There's no argument about it. Even if buyer says, I'll do them, buyer's got to get them done before closing. Then you got a form to do it, buyer agreed to do repairs. Seller and buyer agree that buyer's going to pay for these repairs prior to closing. So, what I love about the VA form though, it talks about if it exceeds that amount, what do you do? The VA form, the FHA form still doesn't say what happens.
The seller can walk, right?
Well, we don't know. The FHA form just doesn't say. It just says they'll pay a certain amount. If it exceeds that, then you get the argument of what do you do then if it exceeds that? Who's in default and who's not? As I tell people, if it's FHA, you better get the appraisal during due diligence. Because if it exceeds that amount, you can ask the seller to do the additional repairs. If the seller refuses, then your buyer can walk. But if it's after due diligence, there is not clear who gets the earnest money and who can terminate. This one says the seller can terminate, but they need an estimate of repairs that shows it exceeds it. So seller's option, they can terminate. Does that make sense? Just remember the FHA form doesn't tell you, if not, what then? Doesn't give you the consequences. You're talking about the Teleforms Committee. I told the attorney when I took this class about that. She's on the Forms Committee, but I need the email. Does that make sense? Is everybody with me on that?
Yes.
Okay, and then we've got public water and sewer, paragraph 16 on last page. If the cost exceeds this amount, this is if it says, as required by VA, both buyer and seller agree that if public water or public sewer system is available at the street and the local authority requires it, it says the local authority has to require it. Who's the local authority?
Government.
It's whoever you're paying your water bill to, right? City or county?
Yeah, that's right.
It'd be your city or your county, right? If they require you to be connected, then the seller's got to pay it. And it has the amount that shall not exceed. If the cost exceeds this amount and seller is unwilling to pay the extra cost, this agreement shall terminate upon seller giving notice to buyer. Just make sure it's got public water.
I'm sure.
And then check if, yeah, because I think you gotta have a septic tank certificate also for VA. To make sure you get that.
VA wants you to be connected.
Yeah, VA wants you to be connected, but it
Period.
says if required by local authorities.
Right.
And so you need to find out whether it is well water or not. And if it's not connected and it's well water, then VA may well require it if the authorities are. And that means if the water is available, is the water line available in the street? If there is, chances are they're going to require it. And I have no idea what it was costing them. We had a lender one time come and talk to us about it. It was like 3 or 4 years ago in their calculation, and they said if it's over a certain amount, VA may not require it, or FHA may not require it. It's too complicated, I'm just telling you. Just make sure it's got public utilities, it's got water. If it doesn't, and it's got well water, you gotta find out if the other houses around there, what do they have, right? And you might call the local authority, you know, and you gotta find out who they pay the water with. Sometimes it's the county, sometimes they're incorporated, if they're incorporated, it's to the city. That's why some people like Michael do not do VA. You know, I'm just saying. Okay, let's move on. We are gonna move on to, and you've got this form. This is new forms here. This is the F-84A, closing attorney acting as holder of earnest money exhibit, and there is F-84B. F-84A is if you're a buyer, let's say the buyer or the buyer or the seller insists on a closing attorney holding the earnest money, and if you're a buyer really want the house, you may have to give in and say, okay, we'll agree. However, we want this F-84A and F-84B, and it's referencing all of the forms now to use that, okay? F-84A is when you want to use an attorney, but the attorney has to agree to it in certain circumstances, okay? At first, paragraph 1 says the closing attorney shall act as holder and in accordance with the terms of the agreement, including this exhibit, an agreement closing attorney to serve as holder of earnest money exhibit. So basically, paragraph 1 says that we want the attorney to be holder if he agrees to it. 84B is the one where you send over to the attorney to agree to it. Closing attorney must agree to become holder within 3 days of the binding agreement date. And so you got to make sure, if you're the one that wants to make sure that attorney's going to hold the earnest money, you better make sure that immediately you send a copy of the contract and you send the forms over, and it's F-84B that you send to the attorney immediately. And a copy of the contract. The attorney doesn't have to do anything until they get the contract, and any amendments have to go to the attorney. You better make sure they get both, because they don't have to do anything until they get them. Buyer must deliver purchase and sale agreement, paragraph 3, to closing attorney within 1 business day of binding agreement date. That makes sense, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. Buyer shall be responsible. So the buyer's responsibility to provide this agreement and any amendments thereto within 1 business day of binding agreement date, and to promptly seek the consent of the attorney to act as holder earnest money if that consent has not already been obtained. You know, but it's not always the buyer that wants the attorney to hold earnest money. Sometimes it's the seller. okay? But it's putting the burden on the buyer to do this stuff, and they're supposed to do it. But I would hope that if you're the listing agent, your seller's the one who wants to do it, you need to make sure this is done, right? Because to your seller's advantage, it's done, timely done. So make sense? Or putting the burden on the buyer to meet all these time limits, but if the seller's the one that's insisting that the attorney hold the earnest money, you're the listing agent, you make sure that all these times are met and you get the information over to the attorney right away. If buyer fails to timely deliver the agreement or any amendment thereto within 1 business day of it becoming binding, such default shall give seller the right to terminate this agreement and notice to buyer, provided, however, that if such notice is not given within 7 days thereafter, seller's right to terminate due to buyer's default shall be waived. So the buyer can be considered in default if this isn't sent to the attorney within 1 day of binding, even if the seller is the one that's insisted on it. So just make sure, if this is filled out and you represent the buyer, that all this information is sent over to the attorney, even if the seller's the one that's insisting on it. And if they don't do it, then the seller has 7 days to terminate. Buyer shall additionally be responsible for paying all earnest money and other buyer trust funds to a holder in accordance with terms of this agreement and any amendments thereto, and immediately notifying seller when the same has been accomplished. So whoever's decided on holding the earnest money is timely deposit of earnest money, yes.
So if we're on the buyer side, do we have any protections? So, like I half dealt with this a couple days ago. We get binding agreement. It's an overseas investor that owns the property. We get purchase and sale signed. We're binding. According to this, I have to have it to the attorney the next business day, but the seller still hasn't signed all the exhibits. So like we don't have we have a bound contract, but not everything is executed.
No, then it's not a bound contract.
Okay, so as long as if they're dragging their feet, they're making us do all this, but they're still not. They still haven't got us all the exhibits.
Seller's got to
We're
sign
still
it.
good.
Now there is an argument if the exhibit is listed on the purchase and sale agreement as an exhibit that they don't have to initial or sign it. But I would say on disclosure statements, seller's property disclosure statements.
Say what you said right before that again.
Okay. Attorneys sometimes say, you know how some of the exhibits just require an initial at the bottom?
Mm-hmm.
They say that if it's listed on the purchase and sale agreement as an exhibit, you really don't need the parties' initials on there.
Okay.
But if some of them require a signature, if it's a signature, like a property disclosure statement or community association exhibit, hello, everybody better sign it. Just makes sense, right?
Okay.
But if it's exhibits that he hadn't initialed, but everything else has been signed, it's binding.
Okay.
Some people argue with you about that, but this has been, many attorneys have told me that. Any questions on that? Just make sure you get the information to the attorney right away. Failure of closing attorney timely agree to become holder. If closing attorney named as holder has not become holder within 3 business days binding rate, then the alternate holder, and that's alternate holder, defined in reference below, shall automatically become the holder instead of the closing attorney. All parties consent to the earnest money being paid or transferred to the alternate holder. So you may have already paid the earnest money to the attorney. It's due right away. Who are you going to give it to? So I guess you got to give it to the attorney first, and then if attorney doesn't agree to do it, attorney's got to immediately transfer that earnest money to whoever is the holder. And who's going to be the alternate holder?
Another way to speak true, really.
Thank you. If at all possible, make us the holder of the earnest money. Okay?
The broker?
Okay, and if you read in paragraph 5, this last sentence, well, the second last, the signature of the alternate holder to this agreement shall be deemed consent of the alternate holder to serve as the holder. The alternate holder's duties and the timing for performing these duties shall not commence until the alternate holder becomes the holder, which means the attorneys fail to sign it, and then they become within 3 days, then they become the alternate holder. And the signature of the broker means the purchase and sale agreement signature of the agent representing the broker. Okay? Because I looked on here and said, wait a minute, there's no signature on here for the alternate holder. but it says the broker's signature to the agreement. The broker's signature agreement is you as the agent's signature on the last page of purchase sale agreement for the counteroffer. Okay, make sure you get notices to and from holder. The notice procedures in the agreement, there is a section of purchase sale agreement. What is proper notice? Proper notice is the email address, fax number if you have it. That's proper notice, and it's got to be on the last page of purchase and sale agreement for both agents, or it's got to be in the counteroffer that's signed. That's who you give proper notice to. And then closing attorney's contact information, that's proper notice to the closing attorney of anything. So you got to put his information on there. And then the buyer and seller initial this form, because all this is an agreement that you're going to ask the attorney to hold earnest money. It is an exhibit to the contract, but we don't know who's going to hold the earnest money yet, right? We just agreed we're going to ask the attorney to hold it. So then you have the next form. This doesn't go to the attorney. This F-84A does not go to the attorney. This is just notifying the buyer and seller what's required of them to ask the attorney to hold the earnest money. F-84B is agreement of closing attorney to serve as holder of earnest money, escrow agreement. And it used to be called something different, escrow agent, I think. So they changed the name on the form. Should only be used when F-84A closing attorney acting as, so that was form we just went over. Earnest money has been made part of the purchase and sale agreement. And so the first one is the consideration and identifying the purchase sale agreement, the binding agreement date. Then it has terms of closing attorney acting as holder. Closing attorney shall have all the pre-printed rights and duties of holder set forth in agreement without amendment or modification. Can't modify what the holder's duties are. They're required to do what a broker is required to do as holder, and that's in paragraph 5 and paragraph 7 of purchase and sale agreement. So the attorney asks you, well, what does that mean? Tell him, hey, you got a copy of the contract contained in paragraph 5 and paragraph 7, the duties of the holder. Paragraph 5 talks about late earnest money. Paragraph 7 talks about when can they disperse earnest money, and if there's earnest money disputes and 10-day letters and all that stuff. That really you ought to know, because you have an earnest money dispute, your client's going to start asking you what are the procedures. The fee or charge for closing attorney service holder. Charlie was here, we talked about this in team meeting. And Charlie said normally they are not going to charge a fee right now. Most attorneys may not charge a fee, but once they start writing 10-day letters and figuring out all the disputes and all this, they may start asking for a fee.
Or saying, I don't want to hold the earnest money, right?
Well, yeah, they may not want to hold the earnest money, which they have that right. But they'll say, okay, I'll hold it, but I want this amount of money. And should be paid at closing by, and who's going to pay for it? I say, whoever is the assistant attorney holder is going to pay for it. Everybody agree?
Yep.
Okay. Closing attorney duties holder in the time period in which they are to be performed shall not commence under the agreement or any amendment thereto until closing attorney actually receives the agreement or the amendment. So if there's any amendments between time you send it over or whatever immediately, sometimes there's an amendment to contract immediately, you better make sure the attorney gets all that information, because his time doesn't start running until he gets it, he or she. This escrow agreement shall be interpreted in accordance with the laws of the state of Georgia. Hello, of course. Attorneys know that. Time is of the essence. And 5, escrow agreement and agreement as the same may be amended constitutes entire agreement. And that's basically what it says in the purchase sale agreement. This escrow agreement and that portion agreement dealing with the rights of the holder shall not be amended or altered against, again, the attorney, and cannot say, hey, I'll do this, but I'm not going to do that. No, you got to do everything that says in the purchase and sale agreement, paragraph 7, paragraph 5. Can't change it. Does that make sense?
Yep.
You want them to do what a broker would do. The reason we're required to do it, we're not parties to contract, because Georgia Real Estate Commission says we have to do it. Whereas in paragraph 5 and paragraph 7 is in Georgia Real Estate rules and regulations for brokers. And then it says closing attorney must agree. They got it in caps, so the attorney gets the message. Closing attorney must agree to become holder within 3 business days of the binding agreement date. And unless they agree, and that means they agree by signing the form on the last page. Make sure the contact information is right. Has not become holder within 3 days of binding agreement date, then the alternate holder referenced in the closing attorney act as holder shall automatically become the holder. And then once again, it talks about the earnest money transferred to the alternate holder. And it has a contact information both buyer and seller on page 1, because I think that would be important to the attorney, and it has additional buyers and sellers on the last page. And then it has a place for the attorney to sign, because it means nothing unless the attorney signs it, right?
Right.
Huh?
Is there anything about when they have to deposit?
Yeah, whatever the contract says. It says they are to abide by the contract, and we have in paragraph 5 when we're supposed to deposit. We have 5 banking days from the date of receipt. Okay. So they got to follow all the rules that we do, and I'm glad they did that, because if attorneys are holding the earnest money in the past, they could do whatever they want. Sometimes we got investors who want their attorney to hold the earnest money. Hello, what's had to happen if they're in default? Had one as a litigation attorney. Because I never got it. Buyer agreed on a TNR that the seller should get the earnest money, and the attorney says, oh, I never got it. Buyer says, yes, I did, I gave it to you. Attorney says, cease and desist asking.
So as far as the time
Who's going to
limit,
sue a litigation attorney? Yes.
As far as the time limit, like for your buyer to turn in the earnest money, should you make it, I guess, past the 3 days? And then
Well, that's a good question. That's why it says that if you say you have a time on the agreement, you're not saying 2 days, 3 days after binding agreement date, then you really ought to send it over to attorney. Attorney, because they're the first one you're asking. And an attorney doesn't have to deposit it for 5 banking days, right? So then if he or she's not gonna be the holder, then it says they have to transfer it to the alternate holder immediately. Does that make sense? I would say that if you're going to use an attorney, I would say earnest money will be furnished within 4 days of binding agreement date. So you can find out who really is going to be the holder of earnest money, instead of have the earnest money floating around and going to the attorney, and then the attorney have to send it back to the holder. Any questions on this form? Is it clear as mud?
Yeah.
No? Yes. Okay, we're almost through. They have an additional page. F-120 can be used with any form. We got the Community Association exhibit to go through. We'll go through this quickly. This is the community, it's changed to F-55 instead of, what is it, F-123, I believe is what it was. It's F-55 now. And it was an F-123, which you see up here at the top. They renamed it. There was rename it. I don't know why, but they did. They changed where it says type association in paragraph A. They use the term have the right instead of replace opportunity to become a member. I don't know why, but they have the right instead of opportunity to become a member. I guess because if it's mandatory, you don't have the opportunity.
No, you don't.
We're going to go down to, because I'm going to go through all of this. Age restrictions, the association, they use the term association instead of community. It was what they used to use it, the community association, I just say this, the association. In E, contact information, they added the name of the association. Before they didn't have the name of the association. They gave you people to contact, but they didn't give you the name of the association. We all know there's some majors like CMA out there that manages property. So they got the name of the association because it kind of helps to know who they are. Some have a good reputation, some of them don't. information regarding who pays different fees. They went to a major extent on this on fees. And this discloses to the buyer that basically when you live in a community association, you have to pay certain ongoing fees, and that they may change, you may have assessments. It's telling the buyer that it may not be the same later on as it is when you sign the contract. Paragraph B on the second page, amounts to pay by seller. They put it in all caps, letting the seller know that they must pay for account statement or clearance letter. And then the last sentence, they said to be prepaid in order to obtain such closing letter. It used to say to provide good and marketable title. I guess attorneys said, wait a minute, that's not exactly right. So they just said it's to get the closing letter. Okay? Assessments and special assessments. This is again amounts to be paid by the seller. It defines it. And it also says B, any transfer initiation fees as that term is defined below, which the association designated or be paid by seller. All the rest of that was in there. It's not changed. It talks about if there's assessments, the seller owes the assessments up through date of closing that are required up through date of closing. And the buyer pays them whatever's due after closing. And then this gives more definition on amounts to be paid by buyer. And it gives like other similar fees which are required to be paid by the association or property company as a one-time fee associated with the closing transactions, and fees to transfer keys, gate openers, key fobs, other similar equipment, collectively transfer and initiation fees. Advanced assessments due at closing for a period of time after closing shall not be transfer and initiation fees and are to be paid by seller. In other words, they're not saying that that's what should be paid by the seller. They're saying no, the buyer has to pay. Okay? They added under A, transfer and initiation fees, they added other fee, excluding closing letter paid by seller. This is buyer will need to pay the following transfer initiation fees at closing or as part of moving into the association, and they added two others on there. But it excludes closing letter paid by seller. It'll be another fee, but it can't be the closing letter that has to be paid by the seller. Any questions on this, the part I've gone over so far? They renamed some sections. The very last one they added on paragraph 7. Well, we're going to look at 5. Seller warrants that seller has accurately and fully disclosed all transfer initiation fees to buyer. If any of the transfer and initiation fees set forth above are not disclosed or increased from what is initially disclosed to buyer above, then all such increases or undisclosed transfer initiation fees shall be paid by sellers. They better get it right. And then they added paragraph 7, the consent of buyer to reveal information to association. That's new. They authorize the closing attorney to give their personal information and all that to the association. Any questions on this form? There's a few changes, not a whole lot of changes on this form.
So the seller should have this all filled out. When
Yes,
you go under
sir.
a contract.
If the seller is in doubt, they better check it out.
But in most cases, they really don't.
They don't.
And we have to follow up because
The listing agent, you're talking if you.
The listing
offer
agent.
to
Most
list
of
it.
the time, yeah, we wait until we have it.
Well, you know what? Are there agents out there?
I'm just telling you.
I know.
Yeah.
And so you're gonna have to
Put
put
it
a
in
special,
special steps.
put in special stipulations
Yeah,
that
have
they'll
it in 2
furnish
days
it
or-
within
or
2
seller
days of
pays all
binding
fees.
agreement
Well, we
date.
call the HOA, and then we tell them that they've made an error, and then we have to, but we just try to do it all up front, because we get, if we don't do it, it's awful.
Well, it is, however, it's good calling the HOA to verify what the seller puts, but don't you be the one that
Right,
tells
we're
the buyer wrong, because guess what the buyer's gonna say?
Yeah.
So make sure the seller fills it out, call the association and verify it with them, and if it's wrong,
We let the
then
seller
you
know.
let the buyer know. Does it make sense?
Could you put a special step if they don't get this, that they have to get it in X amount of days?
Yes,
And
always.
And if they don't, that seller picks up all fees. I mean, you could do that. couldn't you?
They're rarely filled out though, I'm telling you.
No, I know.
Oh yeah.
And
not at
then
all.
one of them, I had an assessment going on in a big high rise, oh my gosh, it was like, the buyer was gonna have to pay $100 and something thousand. And they weren't even aware of this assessment.
Well, guess what? The seller does not have to disclose the assessments. There's no penalty for that. You better check it out for your buyers.
Yeah.
Because that information they put on here, except for what they have to pay.
Yeah, and the companies are horrible to get hold of too.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I know.
worst.
You love it?
It's gotten worse.
Yeah.
It's gotten worse. It's worse than ever. And that's bad for the buyer because, like Debbie said, there could be a major assessment coming. You know, you can also ask for their record of their last meetings, the last 3 meetings of the association, the minutes from their last 3 meetings. I've asked for that before. That the sellers respond for providing the minutes of the, you know, the rules of, current rules and regulations and the minutes of the last 3 meetings of the association. If they're talking about assessments, it's probably in there. And I've had the question, well, the seller knows that they're discussing this high assessment, but it hasn't been implemented. Seller doesn't have to disclose that.
Right.
Any questions on that form? Okay, let me see if there's anything else so you can get out of here. We're past 3 o'clock. They have a new additional signature page for broker agreements. That's a new form. That's additional signature page you can use with any of the brokerage engagement forms. And that's it. It's a lot, isn't it?
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question. I might put an order for new construction. So I should ask her if they will send me. They have agreements usually. The new construction.
Well, new construction sometimes the association, sometimes
Yeah, but no, I'm saying about the
disclosure, yeah.
not only
The
disclosure.
new construction disclosure.
Yeah, but even I will not send the Russia consent agreement. They will send us their contract. Should I have to show it to a attorney? I think so.
I teach new construction. What I used to do is I just compare it to the GAR Contract Construction form. And look for what we cover in there. It's not in there that I know if I'm not an attorney. If you have any questions about it, you can go.
I've been having all kinds of.
I'm trained on our forms, but I'm not trained on.
Oh my God, every.
We were talking about the financial part. I was a little confused. So, like, with me, when I check with whoever's, if I'm representing myself, I find out who's, like, I want to talk to a mortgage broker and confirm that they've got all the paperwork. Because if they don't do that, then I go, they're not an eligible buyer. We could go on the contract and take their house off. As soon as I explain that to the seller, they go, no. I said, we can wait for them to get all their paperwork in. And in the meantime, we might get better off. So let's do it that way. So that's how I feel. In what part do you not know that they may not be getting well?
Whatever, yeah.
So they've already great question.
Because I was a little confused. Am I missing a step in the process that I
You don't know.
Okay.
And that's why they put this in there where the seller has the right to request for a loan.
Okay.
And then if you don't get it, but here's the thing,
And that's after the financial contingency? Okay.
Yeah, when you get an offer, you have this already. And the buyer's required by the finance committee exhibit, they change the language, you get their contact information. Now you have to notify the seller.
Right.
Yeah, and the seller's like,
But for example, like what I would do is once the financial contingency's up, I turn around and I call that mortgage broker again and go, are we good? And I get confirmation. Is that good? Is that what I'm supposed to do? They would lie. They would say, yeah, everything looks great. So then at that point, if I feel like something's fishy, that's when I say I need a commitment. And then I got 7 days to get it to me, and then 3 plus 7, whatever.
Then you gotta find after 7 days, you're in default.
Is that something that I should automatically do, or is it kind of if you feel like?
I mean, I said, what you said was,
and I said, hey guys,
what if your seller reaches I mean, usually people aren't savvy and
So I should make that part of my check. Yeah, okay. That's why I'm here. I want to find out because I like to do things right, and I don't like to be surprised. Because I make enough mistakes filling out the form.
Well, here's the thing. Your client, your seller could just love you.
Is this your home or work? Like, you go there all the time?
I just fired.
Right. And then you're up big.
Because before she started working
I signed one that was up there from the last time.
with another agent. Didn't find
I
out.
don't think we want that around.
But she became so
Did everybody sign in? No, they didn't sign in.
So then since September until now, and she's
Count the heads on
she's
the.
accepted $8,000. I don't think we can do anything here, but properties are so all
we put in the contract that says we have to sell it for over 2 weeks. You get a termination out of nowhere and the whole canceling because they couldn't get the interest rate.
Yeah, you sent me something.
It's not a bar, there's no
Oh my God. Well,
what?
If they do it without having
they won't even take it. It's like
was turned down, they couldn't get the interest rate, it says in the bar form, and they're gonna be as turned down, and the terms on there, and they were turned down for the
It's not on the bar. There's some other.
well, what was the
I just sent her an email saying
They're different.
that we don't have anything in the contract, we're not working on anything, the agreement between us is basically void, you don't do, and I sent her a whole email, so she goes and she gets a document notarized, putting it in writing that we're not.
It's already great. I already feel you're right. And they said that
You're nuts.
they couldn't get anything less than 5%.
Are we good? I know, I was like, see ya. I'm not dealing with that.
Right, because I mean, we would agree to your rate, right? I mean, the appraisal was already done. We know that it appraised and it was 10 grand over what it was originally listed for, and I think it was just
their finance and then they wanted to give them a interest rate.
So I just wanted to ask, so we, I mean, our seller wanted to look into it.
How's it going?
Yeah, I know.
Good.
Good things, but yeah.
You still working your other job?
Oh.
You're never gonna
Wait a minute, give my
transition.
No.
Probably not. I'm not gonna be able to.
I don't know. I dropped it somewhere for some of this. Don't worry about it.
Oh, right. Yeah, because you get business from your other job. That's cool.
Because I need to know what to put on
They
that.
all assume they kind of mirror each other.
Yeah.
Courier, but the express
And you got a pretty good deal, that's what I'm sending some pictures and this is gonna
provided by seller on the model home presents, so what all this, what all this,
It's just saying that it's gonna be sold as is, and we changed some wording in here.
Be a big project
When
for
they were
sure.
talking about the options of it, and I felt like that the seller shall have the right to do it.
Nice to meet you.
The seller's occupancy of the model home, in addition, where replacement brick or stucco is involved in the conversion, the seller acknowledges and accepts the color, finish, and texture of these materials
may not be exact match with the existing brick or stucco on the model home. She was citing anything to the contrary in the agreement. I don't know what, I don't know.
Okay, the warranty periods of the express written warranty were provided by the seller in the model home ordinance No cosmetic work will be done by seller after closing. This provision shall survive closing or termination of the agreement.
But that's not right, because they're gonna have to, oh, no cosmetic work, okay.
There may have to be some.
No, he says that sold as is unless otherwise specified herein.
Okay. So the warranty periods of the express written warranty, what's the warranty? What warranty is that?
It's a 1 year warranty and a 210 warranty.
Okay.
That's what I'm stuck on.
Well, it should start when they buy the house.
Well, that's what I said.
Yeah.
So that should be commenced on when they close. Yes, correct.
Okay.
It was 59.
Yeah, and that covers the buyer and the builder.
What's everybody
Because you do new construction projects.
It's not even my damn house.
You represent the buyer, right?
Yeah, on this one, it's, you know. It's a good class.
She wants to have the granite. If we start.
I'm telling all the other classes. That is totally changed.
You can reface the
He did. It was like, he wasn't gonna be able to do it in 10 days. But we did the whole stairway to the upstairs. That was nice. It was like $1,800.
I thought it was going to be a full house.
Well, I had 50 people say they were and I don't know who didn't sign in, but half of that.
She signed up, or she
How are you?
And then it opened, and then you replaced the railings that went down and like the curly wire, the 80s style or whatever.
Did you get some?
And put it, yeah, put it real thin, and it's very soft. But then handrails, like you're on the posts standing up, and it's super secure.
How was the contract?
Black rails, that's like stuff built on.
Hey, I just wanted to see if you read that paragraph I sent you.
When did you go buying it?
$3,000.
And there's other, other still paints.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm gonna stay here and eat some lunch. And then I've got a 5:45 downtown.
Good.
Good to see you. Thank you. Nancy, seeing you. You were. I apologize.
Well, you have to make an amendment.
I've already added it to the
stating that you have to add it and have the attorney to sign.
So, but it says seller shall have the right to delay the conversion of the sale sign until the end of the seller's occupancy of the model home. If the addition or replacement of brick or stucco is involved in the conversion, purchaser acknowledges and accepts that the color, finish, and texture of these materials may not be exact match with the existing brick or stucco on the model home. Notwithstanding anything to the contrary in this agreement or any other document regarding the sale of the closing of the property, the warranty. I thought I put something in here about the buyer. I guess what I put.
Yes.
I did? Where did I put that at though? I don't even know.
And you just add it and just say, Form F-84B signed by the attorney is, operating agreement is added to the contract.
And under the GAR form is just an amendment, that's what it's.
General amendment. It doesn't say general, it just says amendment. This is amendment or amendment to the non-purchase settlement. Yes, ma'am.
Huh? Well, I just asked her just a few minutes ago when she's going to have that room done and the pictures hung. I mean, I got to set this thing up before I go on vacation. Yeah. Well, no, she's at home. Well, no, she's sick. She didn't even go into work. With a buyer. Texture within the buyer. That's what I'm looking for. Oh, God.